For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anjan Chatterjee. I run the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics, and once a year, we get to sponsor one of the MindCORE seminars with our center, and it's always one of my pleasures to figure out who to invite, who will, that there'll be wide interest in. So I'm delighted this year that it's Adam Green. He has been at Georgetown since 2010. Before that, he was a postdoc at Yale, and before that, he did his graduate work at Dartmouth. He ostensibly is. Are you good here? What's happening?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get the camera to focus on the room. There it is. There it is. Leave you alone.
It's probably representative of the fact how much our lives are ruled by machines now. But what I was going to say is that Adam is, at least on his website, is claimed to be an expert in human creativity, but feels like he is now moving into machine creativity, for better and worse. People will have opinions about that. Notably, he is the editor-in-chief for a creativity research journal. He was one of the founders and perhaps the first, I'm not sure, president of the Society for Neuroscience of Creativity. Were you the first president?
No.
No? Okay, second. All right. And for what it's worth, some of you might know this, some might not. The meeting for the Society for Neuroscience of Creativity is happening in June in Philadelphia here. It will be held at the Fringe Arts Festival. Hannah Merciel is one of the organizers of the meeting if you want more information about it.
Don't worry, Hannah, I've got a fun slide at the end to plug. Yeah.
Adam has been very successful at getting funding continuously from, as far as I can tell, from the National Science Foundation and also the Templeton Foundation. And so he, in this time where funding is so scarce, he has managed to be quite well funded. And just on a more personal note, we've had some collaborations. We shared a postdoc, a guy named Adam Weinberg, who was his graduate student, and for 2 years, he was both in Adam Green's lab and my lab. And then more recently, one of his graduate students, Danny Holzman, collaborated with Vasiliki Melataki in our lab. And just as an observation, it's a small sample of 2. It's quite impressive, the people you train and how you train them. So,
Yep, or they train me.
Yeah.
More than.
So here he is, Adam.
Next slide. Thanks, Anjan. It's great to be here with you. This is such a cool series, the MindCORE series. I had a chance, Jessica pointed me to the YouTube channel. Some really neat talks. So thanks for inviting me to be part of it. I'm going to try to talk about 2 things, and that's almost always a mistake. So we'll see how it goes. But these are two separate projects. I'm going to really just mostly focus on one, and then we'll do highlights, I think, at the end of the other one. But we'll see how the time goes and where the morning or afternoon takes us. So everything I'm going to talk about comes back to a basic observation, which is that we are using AI a lot right now. And one of the important ways that we're using AI is in our creativity. So AI is becoming much more of a creative agent, but also a lot more of a creative partner when we're going through our creative processes. And as this is happening, and as people are watching this happen, one of the things that we are observing is this phenomenon of AI homogenization. So what that means is that AI is making content look more similar, right? So this is a study from a couple of years ago showing that not only do AI stories written by LLMs look like each other, but the more people use ideas that come from these LLMs, the more the people's stories start to look like the LLM generated stories, right? So this is this concept of homogenization. And this is a really cool study, but also a shout out. Oh, does this thing work? Maybe, I don't know. Oh, maybe not. All right. A shout out to somebody that some of you guys will know because he used to be here, Yoed Kennett. And I just couldn't resist because it's such a like suave James Bond pose, which is so not Yoed for anyone who knows Yoed. So I just like, I figured those of us who are Yoed fans might get a chuckle. But it's a great study. And what it's basically showing is that this homogenization effect isn't just happening within these AI systems, it's happening across them. So you've got Gemini and you've got GPT and you've got Llama and you've got all these, these different systems. Well, turns out they're actually all homogenizing with each other, not just separately. And last year, yeah, there's a little sort of inside joke about this picture, but I won't go into it. This is my student, Kibu Moon, who is actually responsible for basically all of the really good stuff that I'm going to talk about today. But this is a paper that he did last year, or a study he did last year, basically looking at homogenization in kind of a cool way, just showing that like when you add more human ideas to a group of ideas, the overall diversity of ideas keeps increasing, right? So that slope is going to keep going up, right? But actually, when you're adding more AI generated content to a set of ideas, that slope starts to flatten out a lot more, right? So you can look at it in this, what he's calling this sort of diversity growth rate way as well. So all of this is pointing to this phenomenon of AI homogenization, especially in creativity. And like, that's where we probably want to be the most careful about homogenization, right? Like, because creativity is about being different, right? Like, I'm a creativity researcher, and like maybe the one thing that I know about creativity is it's about being new and different, right? So there's something really puzzling happening. Because if that's what creativity is about, we're seeing something kind of paradoxical. As AI is homogenizing our creative ideas, the content that AI is generating, or that it's helping us generate, is perceived as just as creative as our content, or even more creative than the stuff that humans generate. So like creativity is fundamentally about being new and different. AI is homogenizing, so it's not new and different, but the content is perceived as more creative. So like, what is that all about? So we had an idea about what it might be about, at least partially. And that has to do with a couple of things, with how creativity perception tends to work, and also with some fundamental differences in how human brains versus AI systems are built for creativity. So creativity perception, it turns out, even before LLMs came along and started writing things, creativity perception for written content tends to be heavily anchored on the surface level cues. So the variability of things at the surface of the writing, particularly the word level stuff, the linguistic aspects of writing, tend to be weighted really heavily when humans make judgments about how creative a written work is. But we're also seeing AI does the same thing. And we'll look at some evidence of that. Okay, so this surface level bias or lexical bias toward really weighting heavily what's happening on the surface in like unique word count, lexical diversity at the word level. These things have a lot to do with driving creativity perception. Okay. For the long, long history of reading human writing, which was like the same as saying writing until not long ago, right? That's been not like perfect, but it's actually been pretty okay. And the reason that that's been pretty okay is because ideas and language are really closely linked for humans. And that's because there are a lot of shared neurocognitive mechanisms that drive the generation of interesting combinations of words that are also driving the generation of interesting combinations of ideas. So these flexible semantic network structures and higher retrieval ability, these are cognitive mechanisms or cognitive individual differences that drive both the generation of creative combinations of words and creative combinations of ideas. That's in humans, right? And so what that means is that when we've been judging creativity based on what's on the surface, again, not perfect, but it's been a pretty reasonable proxy for what's going on at the underlying conceptual level and the actual novelty of the ideas being conveyed by that language, right? The problem is that these shared neurocognitive mechanisms between words and ideas that play out in humans don't seem to play out in nearly the same way in large language models. So, so instead of searching the sort of structured internal semantic networks that we search when we make these distant associations, right, that we consider creative, right? LLMs are, doing these stochastic next token sampling. They're predicting from a learned probability distribution based on their training, right? And they're trying to optimize the next token prediction, right? They can optimize that probabilistic prediction at the surface level much more independently of the underlying conceptual structure of their text than we do. We have to try really hard, actually, to separate the surface from what's underneath the surface. LLMs can do that much more readily, right? And so what this means is that it's a lot easier structurally for large language models to break this link between words and ideas. And that's a big part of what we think might be going on. So our hypothesis, which I'll talk about how we tested it, is that LLMs are breaking this word idea link. And we called this our disjunctive homogenization hypothesis, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's the idea that you're seeing this disjunction between semantic layers, right? Semantic levels. So in particular, the prediction, which we went ahead and pre-registered, was that the word level of these different semantic levels, the word level is going to increase in diversity. But at the same time, you're going to see a disjunction where the ideas are going to become less diverse or less distinct, more homogeneous. And we decided to look at that at both sentence level and the level of whole documents, right? What's the overall idea of what you wrote? So that's the hypothesis. And the first and biggest way that we tested that was with a set of natural experiments at universities, spanning a whole range of different kinds in terms of selectivity, geography, East Coast, West Coast. They're all US universities, but East Coast, West Coast, the characteristics of their applicant pools in terms of demographics, especially. And so this was a flagship state university, an elite private school, a regional private university, and then a selective liberal arts college. So different kinds of colleges, just to get a pretty good representative sampling of the kinds of schools that are out there. And what we did at each of these colleges in partnership with their admissions offices, and also, which I'll talk about a little bit later, in partnership with their offices of institutional research, the people who keep track of how the students actually do when they go to college. What we did was that we looked at the personal statement admissions essays that students wrote when they applied to these colleges. And in particular, we looked at the roughly 4 years before GPT came out, publicly released, and roughly the 3 to 4 years since then, right? And we wanted to see what's changing, right? So this is a natural experiment. It's going to be, it has to be somewhat correlational, and we'll talk later about some more sort of causal inferences. But what we're asking right now is what's changing over time, and is there some sort of inflection point associated with the public release of ChatGPT, which sort of brought us into the LLM era. Okay, and I mentioned we had this hypothesis about disjunction at different semantic levels. So we looked at these levels in these ways. So for the word level, we used DSI, or divergent semantic integration, which is based on word level BERT embeddings. And then at the sentence level, we used sentence BERT, looking at the mean, pairwise, cosine distances. And then for the documents, for the whole essays, we generated document level embeddings using an OpenAI embedding space. And we just looked at the minimum pairwise distances between different essays. One of the things to point out, actually, is that the reason for looking at 2 different idea levels is one of these, the sentence level, is the diversity of the ideas within an essay, right? Because there's lots of sentences within an essay. But the document level is how different are the essays from each other. So that's why I look at 2 idea levels. Do people stop and ask for questions, or like, how do we do it?
Whatever you want.
All right. If something I say makes no sense, and it doesn't look like I'm trying to rush past that because I don't want to explain it, if both of those criteria are met, then feel free to ask. Ask whatever at any time. Okay. All right. Okay. So those were the 3 levels. So why admissions essays, right? Like, if we're, I don't know, study any number of things, but we really are kind of excited about what admissions essays are telling us about the extent of how much AI is reaching into and influencing human writing, right? There's a few reasons for that. So one thing is that these are totally naturalistic. Whatever it is, if they had their mom do it, if they, whatever they did, right? Or they talked to a friend about it, or they wrote it themselves, whatever they did, that's how people are really writing in the real world. Right, that's how at least they're writing this kind of thing in the real world. The difference being, it's not how they write in a lab, right? And it's not how they write when you instruct them that they should use AI. It's not how they write. Well, they're at least told, and we'll talk about that they're not supposed to use AI, but certainly not how they write when they're told that they should use AI, or they should use AI a certain way, or they should use AI a certain amount. All of those things happen in labs. This, whatever it is, for all of its messy hairiness, this is how people are really writing. Okay, high stakes, right? For the kids writing these essays, they matter a ton, right? They want to get into the colleges that they are applying to. And so high stakes matters also because a lot of what's challenging about doing research on human AI collaboration in labs is getting the subjects to care enough about it to try really hard to make the product really good, right? So if you're in there for course credit, or you're in there for $20, and then like you could write a really crappy essay, you still get your $20, or you still get your course credit, like that is not a huge driver to be like, okay, I'm really gonna do my best and work with AI in the way that I think will lead to the best finished product, okay? So that's part of why we like these. Also, sort of foreshadowed, AI use is prohibited in the at the schools we looked at. Now, like, we wouldn't have been doing this study if we thought people actually were gonna follow those rules, right? But the Common App still explicitly says that using AI is not ethical in writing these essays, and the schools that we worked with have similar policies. What that means to us is basically just, if whatever it is, whatever these changes are that we're guessing might happen with AI, if we see them in this kind of writing, it's a pretty safe bet that they're going to also be popping up in places where there's not an explicit prohibition. And like, these prohibitions, we figured kids would break the rules, but we also figured that it would give them some pause, right? Because like you're always worried that like maybe somebody's gonna like use a classifier or check, and like then I'm not gonna get into like they've got some weight, they've got some at least imaginary teeth, right? So in other words, it's a rigorous test case in that sense for the reach of AI into human writing. Also, creativity, which is a thing we were interested in. There have been prior studies showing that these essays are pretty good sources of signal on creativity, but also colleges value creativity. This is something that admissions offices consistently are valuing, and many of the prompts that students were writing, for the prompts for the essay, like describe yourself, but like one of the things that is said in many of these prompts is be creative, right? Or some version of encouraging creativity. And then also, lastly, the writing, when you read them, like some of them are not very personal, but many of them are actually. People talk about some pretty personal things, some life experiences. And their kind of, their own individual narrative that's encouraged. And it also is what people often do. So that you might think that'd be a barrier to having something else writing some of your life story, right? But also, we're interested in this idea of homogenization potentially as it applies to individual narratives, especially when we look at the narratives of people from minoritized groups, right? So are those narratives that have traditionally been more different becoming more the same? So that's part of why we cared about that aspect. Okay. All right, so now I'm talking about results all of a sudden. And it's showing you like a big, huge thing, which is a little bit fuzzy. Is it? It's kind of a little fuzzy. It's not fuzzy where you are? Okay, good. All right, good. So basically, we looked at these 4 universities. Universities are rows, okay? We looked at these 3 semantic levels. Semantic levels are columns. Okay. Basic drink it in, like there's a pretty consistent thing happening here, right? Okay. Looking at individual levels, individual semantic levels, at the word level, what we see before versus after GPT is that the word level diversity was lower before GPT and got higher after GPT. Okay, so the presence of AI is associated with increased diversity at the word level.
To be clear, diversity within documents, not
Within, yes.
Not, you could have measured diversity.
Could have, and other people have, yes. That's not what we're looking at here. No, yeah. We'll look at between, but only with the document level embeddings.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lyle. That's absolutely right. Yes. So this is the diversity of the words within the essay. So basically, how far apart are the words within the essays, right? Yeah.
You earlier referred to unique word count, which is, I guess, the count of unique words, like the number of different words in this.
Yeah.
Is not the same.
It's not the same, but those two are certainly related. Yeah, they would definitely be related. Yeah. Right. We like to use a bunch of embeddings and throw embeddings at everything these days, but like honestly, you could probably get a very similar answer from that. Yeah. So that's totally right. Okay, so words going up, right? Okay, sentences at the same time going down, right? So this again, and thank you again, Lyle, this is still within essays, right? So the sentences, how different are the sentence level, how far apart are the sentence level embeddings within the essays, right? That distance is actually decreasing, right? And now we're talking about between. Now we're talking about how different are the essays from each other. So these are document level embeddings where each essay gets exactly 1. And then you look at the distances between those. Yeah.
The middle of the sentence level, is that diversity of grammatical structure or is it diversity of ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it's closer to ideas than grammatical structure because, these embeddings are based on the meanings. So yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Just that these distances are decreasing. I'm sorry. Uh,
Question is, what does diversity mean that's a negative number of z-scores?
yeah, these are right. Yeah, this is just those. Yeah, that's a little confused. Right, these are just from z-scores. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, that's worth that because yeah, there's not. It's a great diversity itself. Probably can't. I'd have to think a lot about what would make absolute negative diversity. Yeah. We did actually. So we looked at that as an alternative specification, right? And it didn't explain the effect. That is right. That is right. Yep. We actually specifically looked at that. Yeah. So and these guys are co-authors on the paper. So if and well, this is why I feel okay saying this, but like you should ask Kibum because that is deep in the supplementary materials, and he told me that he looked at COVID as an alternative specification, and that it doesn't explain this effect, and we reported that. But it's worth checking out the
Wasn't it just the pandemic?
No, we say it in the main text, but then we report all the guts of it in the no. So I'm giving you the main text version. But it is a great question. Yeah, and one that I actually didn't think to ask, but my postdoc, I'm not my grad student did. So yeah.
I think the COVID question may sort of think about the other possible explanation, which is there's a homogenization in people's own experiences
Right.
over time.
Right. Is that
I'm
loud?
pretty sure that's not what's happening, but one way to sort of look at that is, well, maybe if you sort of think it on a year by year level, and if just culture is becoming more homogenous, then you see a deep.
So, Sudeep, thank you. I'm glad we worked this out ahead of time that you were going to ask that question. So if you look at the event time models, right, you can see that there's a pretty clear inflection point here, right? So it's not that these changes are happening sort of at the same rate across time smoothly, right? Which you might expect in that scenario, but instead that in general, they're pretty flat or only changing modestly before the advent of GPT. And then in the case of word level, spiking up. In the case of sentence and document level, spiking down. So because absolutely, those sort of broader trends across time could certainly have been an explanation. Great. Okay. So I mentioned we were interested in looking at this across demographics as well, and we did. So basically, blue is up and red is down. That's probably all you can, from far away, like really pull from this figure. But so here again, we see word up, sentence and document down. But this shows you that that was happening for all these different demographics that we looked at, all these different demographic groups. If you really have good eyes, you might be able to pick out that the biggest effects were in students who identify as Black and international students. That was true, actually, interestingly enough, on both sides of the disjunction. So these students showed both the greatest increase in word level diversity and the greatest decrease in idea level diversity, right? Which would probably suggest something about the extent to which AI may be influencing their writing more, right? And that could have to do with the greater difference between the ways that they would write without AI and the more culturally normative ways that AI generates content. So again, this is particularly important, I think, to some in the admissions space, because these are students whose perspectives are often valued in building a diverse community. Okay. Hey, there's a guy we know. So let's get back to this paradox that we talked about, right? So the paradox is perceived creativity is going up, and the ideas are actually becoming less novel and different, right? That's the paradox. So if we're talking about this sort of natural experiment, what's happening over time, the way we would ask that question would be, is there a change in the perceived creativity of essays after GPT, right? So that's what we did. But in order to do that, we brought in a ringer. We brought in Ben Lira here. Well, he was generous enough to offer his time, I should say. So we had 22 creativity experts read and rate for creativity and other things, about 50 essays each. Then what we did, so that gives us some human perception data, right? How are humans who know something about creativity perceiving the creativity here? Hannah, your old advisor was certainly one of the, your former, not your old, your former advisor was one of our experts. Then using that, that also allowed us then, well, Ben was a big part of this, to fine tune a couple of LLMs actually, but I'll talk about a GPT model. And then that model would then read as many essays as we want. Like, we couldn't really get the experts to read more than 50. Like, that took, I was one of these, and like I was done. I was done. And I don't know how the people in these admissions offices do it. That was not easy. But our model was happy to read as many as we wanted, so we had it read anywhere from 0 to 128. Could have had more, but I'll talk about why we were interested in seeing what happens as that number increased. And then in both cases, both for the human and AI raters, we instructed them to consider all the essays before rating each essay. All right, I'll talk about why that matters too. So that's how we did the rating. What did we find? Yes, indeed. At all the universities, creativity ratings increased after ChatGPT's release, despite the decreasing distinctness of the ideas, right? So the paradox has reared its head in these natural experiment data, okay? Okay, so maybe this disjunctive homogenization that we've seen can help us explain the paradox. And so we tested that. And in fact, that's what seems to be driving a lot of this. So this is a mediation model. And basically what it's showing you is that the increase in diversity at the word level after GPT is explaining the increase in the creativity ratings. And in fact, that path is so strong, that effect of the increasing diversity of the words is so strong that it's overshadowing the effect of the simultaneous decrease in diversity and distinctness at the sentence and document levels, right? So we're starting to maybe get an answer for our paradox here, and what might actually be happening. And again, come back to the idea that this maybe isn't super surprising, because we've always known that people gravitate toward the surface level when they're evaluating or perceiving how creative a written work is. All right, and then, so this is why we had the people read so many and the model read even more, because one of the ways you could think about this paradox, which has been sort of the, I guess, like just kind of intuitive take on it, has been, well, we're seeing this paradox because people rate things one at a time, right? So if you rate things one at a time, then it doesn't matter how homogeneous they are, right? They could all be exactly the same, but if you're only rating one of them, you wouldn't know that, And so then, you know, it looked really super creative. It's just, you didn't know that everything else was kind of like it, right? But this is basically showing what happens when you have the model, the fine-tuned model based on the human experts, read more and more essays, right? The effect, so these different colored lines are the different semantic levels, right? And so what you're seeing, that red line is for the words, right? And you're seeing that the effect of the word level diversity on creativity judgments doesn't really decrease much as you read more and more essays. And basically, all of these lines are pretty flat. The contributions of these word and idea levels to the creativity perceptions don't change much as the model is exposed to more and more essays, even though it's told, read all the essays first before you rate any of the essays. So it's not rating them one at a time. So this suggests that there's something pretty strong about this lexical bias that we have when we form our sense of how creative something is. And it actually, and I'll come back to it, but like, it really matters a lot for how we make judgments about whether AI is making us more creative. Because ultimately, when we make a judgment like that, how do we make a judgment like that? We measure the creativity of the output. Well, how do we measure the creativity of the output? It turns out this is what we do, right? And so if this is what we do, then all we might be doing is saying that that AI is making our words more diverse and actually not making our ideas more diverse. And in fact, possibly making our ideas less diverse. And that will actually come up in a moment, how these layers relate to each other. So everything that I've talked about so far has been in the context of this set of natural experiments, right? Natural experiments are obviously, as I said, correlational, right? You're seeing what's happening over time. You're looking for some inflection point that you think might be important, right? But they're not giving you any grounds for a causal inference, right? So we wanted to make some causal inferences. And so we added some controlled experiments here. And one of those controlled experiments brought in about 200 of the students who had written the essays in the natural experiment from before GPT, okay? So these were students whose data were part of this natural experiment, and we knew that they weren't GPT-written essays or AI-written essays because they wrote them before GPT was out there. We brought them in and we asked them to generate prompts for GPT to either revise or rewrite their essays. And so we wanted to see then what would be the causal influence if the actual students who are part of the natural experiment were using now AI to change or totally rewrite those original essays, right? And what we found is that all of a sudden disjunctive homogenization emerged again. So if you're looking at the comparison of their original essay that they submitted to college before GPT was around versus what happened when they prompted GPT to either revise or rewrite that essay. For the both revised and AI-generated essays, you see word level diversity going up and both sentence and document level distinctness diversity going down. That effect was consistent for both revision and rewriting, but in general, stronger for the full rewrite. And that's, I think, clearest here, where you can see that basically the more hybrid version, where you're just having it revise what you wrote, is retaining more of that document level distinctness. And the total rewrite is losing the most document level distinctness. So again, just this kind of thing that I think a number of people have noticed, which is like, well, if you want to have less effects of AI, don't have AI write the whole thing. Yeah.
So, like, the AI generated essay, then not in the prompt tell the ChatGPT like what you had done before, or do you still give it the essay, but say like,
Oh,
redo it?
no. So the student had the prompt from the college, and then it said, and then the student said, here's what, I'd like you to write an essay like this. Yeah, I'd like you to write this kind of essay. But you're right, but it wasn't a draft, but it was just like, I'd like you to write an essay that's like this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, so there's still a little bit of human in that, right? So like if it was just like, hey, just write something, then it would probably be even more. Yeah. Cool. So then we also did another controlled experiment because we really wanted to see like what is driving this disjunctive homogenization thing I can't even say it, disjunctive homogenization that it seems to be showing up in all of these AI influenced texts, right? Like what is it about how AI writes that's causing that, right? And so we pulled essays from across the different colleges that we worked with, ended up with 1,500 of them from before GPT was released. So we call these human essays. And then we just did the thing that Angela was asking about, which is basically, hey, here's the prompt, just write something, although we did say something like, you're a very good college essay writer, please be creative and authentic and specific. We gave it like, some instructions like that, but we didn't say, write it about when my dog ran away, which is like the dog running away. Like I've read a lot of these, dogs run away. Like if you want to spare your child some trauma, like don't get a dog. We didn't tell it that. So it wrote whatever it wanted to, right? But then the question we had is, would there be differences in the relationships between these levels, right? Because what we're asking here, and of course, like if I'm going to tell you this is what we're asking, this is probably what we found, and we did. Are we decoupling these levels, right? So we looked at these at the diversity each of the levels, and then we calculated the correlation between the diversities, right? Okay, and so this still kind of blows my mind, right? So like in humans, which is kind of actually understudied, but like we have like I talked about some indicators of it at the like cognitive level, but like it's showing up in our data on these essays. Humans at the word versus at the word to document level show a positive association between diversity at those two levels, right? GPT reversed that. The reason that blows my mind is because what that's saying is the more diversity of words, actually the less distinctness of ideas, right? The essays that had the greatest like colorful, interesting language were actually the least different from each other, right? And if you look at the word to sentence association, it's not going positive or negative, but the difference is just as big, right? The difference is just as big, and it's pretty darn strong for humans, and like pretty darn weak for GPT. So you're seeing this decoupling. The word and idea levels are coming apart, right? And then we also replicated this in the natural experiment data, right? So we looked at before versus after GPT, and we see this same sort of decoupling in terms of the relationships between the levels, right? It wasn't quite as consistent as what we saw when we just had GPT do it, but certainly for the word versus document level, it was really strong. And so I think this is kind of scary, and I do think that this is like something for people to know, for people to keep in mind, that this link that we've always assumed was there, and we almost can't help it with our human writing, seems to be breaking or weakening. All right, so here's some takeaways. Where's none of this shows me time. I have 11 minutes. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I want to leave time for questions. You know what? I'm not like a huge summary person. Surface diversity, like what does this mean for AI creativity? Basically, if language can increasingly vary independently of ideas, then the ways we're assessing creativity probably have to change, right? And I think it's most important for contexts where we're saying, how much does AI make you more creative? Or we're studying how much does AI make you more creative? How do we know? We measure creativity. How do we measure creativity? Turns out we're measuring the lexical level. So we really don't know that AI is making us more creative. And in fact, it might look like it's making us more creative, but it may, underneath that, be making us less creative. So we need multi-level analyses. And then just the thing about if this is showing up in these essays, it's probably showing up other places. Okay, so I said I was going to try to talk about two things, and I said it was a mistake. And so at least I own that. But I'm going to be really, this, again, just the highlights. Okay, so all of this is about like homogenization, a lot of stuff out there about homogenization. The assumption is homogenization is bad. And like I've assumed that as much as anybody, right? But like we thought about it for a moment one day, we're like, wait a minute, hold on. There's another alternative here, right? One possibility is that this heterogeneity of human ideas is made up of a bunch of beautiful thinking that like AI is just, squashing and leaving out a bunch of really good human thinking, right? There is another possibility. That possibility is that the heterogeneity of human ideas reflects the fact that we have a lot of bad ideas, right? Reflects that like humans have good ideas and humans have bad ideas. And it could be that when you put a bunch of bad ideas in with a bunch of good ideas, it looks more heterogeneous. And that's what's driving the diversity of ideas that distinguishes us from AI, right? And if that's true, then AI homogenization is actually leaving out the bad stuff, and maybe so it's not as bad as we think, right? Kind of a scary question, but we felt like somebody had to ask it, right? So we did. And so I'm going to go kind of fast through this. But so this is our question. This is every paper I write has at least one dad joke in it, which my now 14-year-old can roll her eyes about. But is thinking outside the box, right? Good thinking. And so here we took a bunch of essays. We went back to our college essays, right? In this case, we have essays from students who actually matriculated at the colleges where we were studying. And we have data on how they did in college and some other stuff from the Offices of Institutional Research, right? So we had 25,000 of those from humans who wrote their statements, their essays before GPT. And then we had AI generate those essays based on the college prompts. So there were just 25,000 of each. Okay. Won't go into detail on the pipeline, but we toss these into a pipeline that basically, through some clustering algorithms, allows us to say which human ideas are the most different from AI ideas. Which human ideas are expanding the idea space the most relative to the AI homogenization, right? So this is how we get outside the bots, right? We figure out who's outside the bots. And overall, you see what you might expect to see here, which is like GPT is a lot more smunched up, right? And human is more spread out, right? That's more or less what we usually see when we look at this homogenization phenomenon. But the thing that we wanted to do, that our metric allowed us to do, is specifically separate the humans who are occupying idea space that's more similar to where the AI ideas are, right? So the humans that are inside the bots versus the humans that are occupying the space that's outside the bots, whose ideas are more different from AI ideas. And what we wanted to then be able to do, and this is just distributions of that metric, so don't even worry too much about that. The big question is the outside the bots thinking predicting something good? And the something good here was future performance in college. And so we had GPA data for these students, and we asked this question, and it turned out that yes, the students who were thinking outside the bots went on to do better in college than the students whose thinking was more like AI. And we also saw that they had higher SAT scores and in a separate sub-experiment, better creative problem-solving ability. So all of this put together, our takeaway is that, is thinking outside the box good thinking? Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah.
The higher SAT students were just AI less?
Well, so these were all because of that question. We only used essays from before GPT. So it's like whose thinking is more like AI's thinking, but yeah, no, but that's also a really interesting question. It's just a slightly different question. Yep. Okay, that's all I'll talk about with the second thing. But I want to say thanks, and Hannah, I want to plug the Society for the Neuroscience of Creativity meeting, which is happening in Philly at Fringe Arts, which looks like a super, like I don't like, I feel like I'm going to be super intimidated because it's like a super cool hip place to be. But there's going to be, like, if you like AI stuff, there's AI stuff. You like brain stuff, lots of brain stuff. But there's going to be like singing and painting and stuff like that. Like there's going to be actual art stuff happening there. And Anjan is going to be leading a symposium about arts and neuroscience. And so there's just every reason for you to be there. Also, it's like right here, and it'll be summer. It won't be. I promise you, it won't be raining those days. And you can come and have a lot of fun with us at the SFNC meeting. And oh, it's also sponsored by Penn MindCORE. So like it would be like you have to come. Like you'd be like shunned if you don't come. So you know, I'll both like there's a carrot and a stick here. Thank you guys. This I really appreciate it. Wow.
Comment and a question. In
All right.
the business school version where they talk about innovation rather than creativity,
Yes.
bots are shown like you that they're just less innovative in terms of how many ways to use a brick.
Yep.
But if you do a diversity of prompts,
Yeah.
you can actually get the bots to be more diverse than humans.
Well, so the diversity, yeah,
This is a somewhat different setting, but
It
it's,
is.
it's a comparable one where it's how many ways can you use this object?
yes.
It's an objective pre-specified criteria.
But it also matters how you measure that diversity.
Yep, and they just use the standard one they use at the standard business school.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's the same as creativity, but it's interesting to think of.
Yes. And so, but I think what some of this points to is we have to be careful about how we're measuring diversity and at what semantic level. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask actually the question. In some sense, students are trying to optimize not their GPA for the applications, but they're trying to get into college.
Yes.
And so my question is, for the college admissions people, it's maybe a Ben question, do the college admissions officers value your surface lexical diversity, or the college admissions people who read a crap load of these things borrow your document level actual diversity? Are people optimizing the right things for admission or the wrong thing?
Well, I can tell you because we're working with these people, they don't know what the hell to do. Right? They really, and they're in a.
You have the data.
Well,
We can actually
yes,
tell
and
which ones lead to be getting in. Should I have my kid write lexically diverse?
So
or
it-
diverse?
historically, a lot of these essays were read actually intentionally with at least some focus on, is this person using correct grammar? Is this person using like correct word choice, right? Like are they misusing words? Like a lot of that has always been actually a part of how these essays have been assessed. So this is part of what's confusing for admissions officers. The admissions officers that are, because we've convinced them they should actually be looking more at creativity, even when they do, right, it does seem that they are focusing more on these lexical levels. So it's a great point, because if what you really want is to get into college, then probably the lexical level can help you. But we are coming along and working with these admissions offices and actually developing metrics like this outside the box metric to say, don't do that anymore. Stop doing that, because that's not what's actually going to predict better performance in college. And because like one of the reasons for that is I think very much Angela's question, which is like the ability, let that ring. But the ability to, and now I have to just turn it off. All right. That's my high school buddy. Thank you. The ability to not just generate ideas that are different from AI, but like the willingness, right? Like the actual willingness to do that in this era is very likely, I think, to be a predictor of future success in a lot of things, right? So those are very good questions. But yeah, I mean, if your kid's writing their essay right now and they want, like, I would say, But see, here's the thing. You can actually get the best of both worlds. Like generate your own ideas. And then you can have AI like say, hey, pretty this up, right? Like get me that word level, fun that you do. Yeah. Yeah.
If I understood one of the early slides, the 22 experts, which was you and Roger,
Yeah.
were just produced by lexical diversity.
Yes. Yes.
So what's up with that?
And James, who's right there. I mean, like if you think of like who's a creativity expert, like it's James Kaufman, right?
I think you guys would be sensitive to sentence level, idea level first, right? And so,
We certainly would have liked to think so. Yeah.
you guys
Yeah.
not using bots to rate the diversity of personal statements. Like just run through the, 5
Oh, they totally are.
They are.
They absolutely are. And this is leading to other big problems about like AI narcissism. AI prefers its own content, right? Specific models prefer their own content. So if you cheated and used a different model from the model that the college is using when it reads your essay, it's going to downgrade you. And if you didn't cheat at all, it's going to probably downgrade you because it's human. It doesn't like human content as much as it likes its own content. They absolutely, I mean, this has been a thing at the University of North Carolina, which I care about because I grew up in North Carolina, but like at a lot of schools, they're doing this. And the answer isn't that we shouldn't be using any computational approaches to assess essays or writing in general. It's that we have to be super careful and we have to like know what we're measuring. But yeah, human essay readers, because they have had to read so many in the past. And by the way, like the Common App totally changed this because these colleges, once the Common App was a thing, every college gets deluged with with applications because it's like, oh, I just check a box, right? And then I've applied to all of these schools. Well, if a human is actually reading the essays at all of those schools, like that is a massive multiplier of the workload. So yeah. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Love this work. One thing I was hoping you might have shown us was the actual ideas that were being either amplified or neglected by the LLM. I'm particularly interested in the context of these racial effects, for example. Are Black essays becoming like white essays, or white essays becoming like Black essays?
It's a great question. We didn't ask.
Their own kind of thing, and
No, it's a great question. We didn't ask. We assumed that I think that the Black essays are becoming like white essays because other people, not us, but other people have looked at like, obviously the training sets for these models, and like when you have like massive like overrepresentation of like certain culturally normative kinds of narratives, right? Like that's what the models are going to think is good. That's what when they're predicting what will be a good thing to write, that's going to be how they do it. So it would be mind-blowing if we find that actually the white kids' essays are starting to look more like the Black kids' essays did before GPT, but we didn't ask, so I don't know. Yeah.
The way you have framed it, that this disjunction is intrinsic to the LLM, I guess not that that they're incapable of doing anything else. I guess it's not at first blush to be obvious that would be true. Like that the commercial products are there's probably some herding together in terms of parameter space, and they're highly complicated models. I can imagine that if you gave the model growers the instruction. Change this feature, they might be able to change this feature. So I'm wondering if you have thought about it more than I've just been thinking about it over the course of your talk.
I don't know if I've thought about it more than yeah. Well, so it's not, yeah. There's some pretty baked in stuff, right? Like so. When you have a probabilistic architecture, right, and you're trying to optimize, the token prediction, right, like that's going to tend, especially when you have a bunch of users who are all sharing this same learned probability distribution, right, that's going to tend to give you homogenization, right? And that is, well, that plus part of what happens when we grow the models is we give them human reinforcement learning, and humans reinforce culturally normative, safe kinds of responses, right? So that's another thing that leads to the homogenization. What's going on with like the shared data set and things that are overrepresented in the data in the training data set, that's a part of it too. But these are all things that are not like one setting away from being. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do like super deliberate, super intentional prompting that can prompting strategies that can mitigate some of this. Although you have to ask at a certain point, like if people were prompted in like all of those diverse ways and like given like you have to make sure that comparison is fair, and then you have to look at how you're actually measuring the diversity of the responses at like different semantic levels. We did say things like, be creative when we prompted AI, and we've done things like, chain of thought kinds of prompts. And you see, and other people have like really drilled into this even a lot more than we have to see, what is the limit. In general, especially at the document level, when you have text that's relatively long, this seems to be I haven't seen any evidence that this is moving a whole lot. Yeah.
But when we get here, like these AI models are interesting. We're diverse, or if it's spontaneity.
Yeah.
Might one make the argument that like using AI at least slightly a little bit might make better writing in the sense that it makes creativity and maybe makes it more coherent or something. But then there seems to be like contradictory at the end of what you're saying of like the outside of plot thinking.
Wait, I'm sure you're right, but tell me how. The higher GPA were the people who were less overlapping with AI. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
First half, where like maybe using a little bit of AI would perceive better writing.
So that is a good question. And the reason that's confusing is because the second study was not looking at these different semantic levels. It was just looking at these ideas at the idea level diversity. So we can't really say anything from those data alone about what like more diverse words versus less diverse words would mean. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. That is confusing because I said it was a mistake to talk about two studies, and that yeah.
I was just asking Ben in a whisper. It was like, there's a reading level, right? Flesh Kincaid.
Yeah.
And like when you say word level diversity, the one table, those are like very common, right? But then, reify, like, aardvark, like, plate, whatever, like these are higher reading level, less common, right? Because of course, reading level and commonality are causally linked. So when you say that word level diversity increases, is it basically kids are using fancier vocabulary?
Well, yes.
Supplement and the main text at some point, but it does go up, right? Oh, from your paper.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm sure you're right, and I don't even remember it, but okay, good. I'm glad that I didn't forget something from the study.
Example, like what is happening? Like what is going on?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. It's a good question, and maybe it's a little bit related to the projects that we'll get to do with our shared hero Keith Holyoke. But I think when you talk about diversity, right, like the thing we're actually directly measuring is how far apart are they from each other, right? So yes, that probably has, like, it's more likely that aardvark is going to be far away from lots of other stuff, right? But like, it's a little bit indirect because it's about the distances between them, if that makes sense. Except,
Probably massive.
oh no, I think yeah, no, exactly.
Causal structure
yeah.
is a little unclear.
Yeah.
Whether it's reading level I mean, diversity is an empirical fact. Reading levels are
Yeah.
interpretation.
But so right. I mean, I think that's probably right. So what would that change?
Correlated with reading level, just like fancier words, let's call it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Then really maybe what ChatGPT is doing is giving us more sophisticated, fancier words, right? That
So it looks like someone's
Yeah.
smarter and has a higher
Totally.
reading level, which in humans may be correlated with creativity, and bots are.
Yes. Oh, I totally think that's
So,
what's
so
happening.
the,
Yeah.
your disjunction still holds.
Yeah.
The causal story is different.
Yeah. No, I think it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally right, and I think that's absolutely a big part of why we see so much gravitation toward the word level when we assign our judgment of how good or how creative it is because we get really impressed by high dollar words.
then what the strongest test of that would be like controlling for Flesh Kincaid, the results still hold.
Yes. Although, I mean, I don't know that, like, I'm not sure.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah. I would need to think, yeah.
About, like nothing. But
Yeah.
like, probably not nothing. It's covariate.
Yeah.
So
No, I don't. I think that would be interesting. I guess I'm not sure. Yeah, I think those two things are so related that I think the takeaways might be pretty similar. But I mean, I do get the question, and we can do that. We totally. I mean, we can do that. So yeah.
Gets at sort of like different recommendations for what is good writing.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like,
Yeah.
A lot of the, I think experts say don't use advanced words, write at a lower reading level.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see whether sort of actually people don't follow that mentality.
We can like we got the data. So we
Yeah. I don't know, maybe to push back on that a little bit. Like at the beginning of your talk, you explained LLMs as mixed token generators, right? So if LLMs are giving us fancier, more diverse words, wouldn't you expect it to sort of regress to the mean and give us more?
Well, so they're predicting what they think are good responses, not the most common responses. Yeah. So depending on what, yeah.
Sure, you already answered. Curious how you're thinking.
And therefore your interpretation or as a function of potentially like the implicit bias that the LLMs may have been used, for example.
I think it's part of it. I might not be understanding. Can you say the question again? Because I want to make sure I understand it.
Maybe I don't.
No, I bet you do.
So the diversity for the LLM.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
that LLM itself, then therefore calculating cluster, how big cluster is, small, whatever. And the LLM itself is trained on some big amount of data.
Yeah.
And that data itself is like Reddit or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like biased.
Yeah.
Therefore, how are you thinking about your results?
So I really like that question. I think probably what absolves us, at least largely, of that sin is that we use those embedding spaces both for the human content and the human generated content and the AI generated content. So whatever sort of imperfections they may have should apply equally for the human or for the pre-GPT and post-GPT. But and if there was a better way, we would do it. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So.